There is a name that Wembley Stadium once held its breath for, a name that made Brazilian defenders nervous and German coaches reach for their notebooks in frustration. That name was deliberately erased from the story the world chose to tell. A man born in the rubble of a destroyed continent, raised in a city still counting its dead, somehow became one of the most technically complete midfielders the 20th century ever produced. The question that haunts football historians is not how he did it, but what was stolen from him before he ever had the chance. He was born in 1947 in Starogard Gdański, a modest Polish town still exhaling the dust of World War II, into a family that had nothing except the stubborn will to survive. His father was a soldier who had seen things no person should see, and he passed down to his son not comfort but endurance. The streets of post-war Poland were not playgrounds, they were obstacle courses of survival. And yet every spare hour the boy found his way back to the same patch of dirt to move a ball with a precision that seemed to belong to someone much older. Neighbors would stop and watch him, unsure of what exactly they were seeing. Poland in the 1950s was a country being rebuilt brick by brick under the shadow of Soviet influence, where everything from culture to sport was considered a tool of the state. Football was no exception, and for a gifted young boy that meant his talent would never truly belong to him. At the age of 15 he was spotted by Legia Warsaw, the most powerful club in Poland and one deeply intertwined with the Polish military establishment. It was not a signing, it was closer to a conscription, a moment that would define every choice and every limit he would ever face. The system that controlled Polish football in the 1960s was not interested in nurturing greatness, it was interested in owning it. Players were registered as military personnel, which meant they could not simply leave, could not negotiate, could not dream of a future the state had not already planned for them. Despite the invisible cage, his performances on the pitch were impossible to contain. By his early 20s he was conducting Legia Warsaw matches like an orchestra, reading space seconds before it opened, threading passes that teammates admitted they had not even imagined yet. European clubs began to notice. Reports from scouts described him in language usually reserved for Brazilian players, a natural intelligence of movement, an instinct that could not be coached, a player who made the game look inevitable. But every approach hit the same wall. He was not for sale, he was state property. If you have ever felt that the world could see your potential but the circumstances around you refused to let you reach it, then you already understand something of what he carried into every single match. And if stories like this matter to you, follow Football Untold, because there are dozens more waiting to be told. The 1968 European Cup campaign with Legia Warsaw briefly opened a window to the wider world, and what the world saw astonished it. He dismantled some of the finest clubs on the continent with a combination of technical mastery and physical stamina that seemed almost unfair. Yet every time the curtain of those performances fell, he returned to Warsaw, to a system that measured his worth in political utility rather than footballing destiny. The frustration never left his eyes, teammates would say later, even in moments of triumph. Everything changed in 1972. Poland traveled to Munich for the Olympic Games, a tournament the football world barely noticed, and proceeded to shock every assumption anyone had ever made about Eastern European football. He was the engine and the artist of that Polish side, a midfielder who could destroy attacks with interceptions in one breath and launch precise 40-meter passes with the next. Against Hungary in the final, he was simply on another level from every other player on the pitch. Poland won gold. For a nation that had survived occupation, partition, and decades of great political control, it was not just a medal, it was proof that something inside them could not be extinguished. And standing at the center of it all was their number 10. 2 years later came 1974 and the World Cup in West Germany, and Poland arrived not as romantic underdogs but as genuine contenders. The world had been warned at the Olympics. The world had not fully listened. Poland defeated Argentina. They eliminated Italy. They shocked Brazil. And at the heart of every performance was the man in the number 10 shirt, dictating tempo, arriving late into the box, converting penalties with an icy calm that made goalkeepers feel like they had already lost. He finished the 1974 World Cup as Poland third in the world, one of the tournament greatest players, and with 7 goals to his name including 3 goals in one match against Haiti that announced to every television screen on the planet that this was not a normal footballer. Back in Poland the streets were electric. In a country where gray was the color of everyday life, he had brought something luminous home, and ordinary people who had never left Warsaw could close their eyes and for a moment imagine the whole world knowing their name. He was named in the team of the tournament. Offers flooded in from Manchester City, from clubs across Europe and South America, names that represented everything a footballer could aspire to. Every single approach was blocked by the same wall it had always been blocked by. He continued to dominate at Legia Warsaw, continued to represent Poland with distinction, continued to be the most recognizable and beloved athlete in his country. But behind closed doors, the clock was running, and everyone in Polish football knew it. The 1978 World Cup in Argentina was supposed to be his final statement to the world, a last chance to show that everything the system had delayed could still be distilled into 90 minutes of brilliance. Poland qualified, but the tournament was different, and he was older. Poland exited earlier than 1974. The golden generation was fading and the system that had kept it locked inside its own borders for too long had finally extracted its full price. He was 30 years old and the door to the wider world was finally, agonizingly, beginning to open. In 1978, already past 30, he was finally permitted to leave. Manchester City signed him, a moment that should have come 5 or 6 years earlier when he was at the absolute peak of his powers. English football welcomed him warmly, but warmth could not replace the lost years. He gave everything he had left to English football, and those who watched him play at Maine Road even in those final years spoke of a football intelligence that could not be diminished by age, a way of seeing the game that younger players simply did not possess yet. In 1981 he left England and moved to the United States to play in the North American Soccer League, part of a wave of legendary European names who brought their twilight years to American pitches. He adapted, he competed, he never stopped being exactly who he was. Then on the 1st of September 1989, a road in San Diego was where the story ended. A car accident took him at 41 years old, a man still involved in football, still planning a future, still full of the quiet fire that had defined every moment of his life. In Poland the grief was total. This was not merely the death of a footballer, this was the loss of a man who had been the living proof that something extraordinary could exist behind walls built by others, that talent is unstoppable even when institutions do everything in their power to contain it. Statues now stand in Warsaw bearing his image. Stadiums carry his name. Children who were born decades after his death wear shirts with his number 10. But the truest monument to him is the question every football lover should ask when they hear his story. What more could he have been if the world had simply let him? History has a habit of remembering the trophies and forgetting the men who deserved more of them. Kazimierz Dana deserved everything the game could give, and the fact that so few outside Poland know his name is not a reflection of his quality, it is a reflection of how much football still owes him. If this story moved you, if you believe that the forgotten deserve to be found, then follow Football Untold, because every week we go looking for the players, the clubs, and the moments that history left behind, and we refuse to let them disappear again.